Good evening. I'm Charles Payne. Fast-moving and stunning developments on the campaign trail today. Donald Trump on the counterattack again after two more women have stepped forward and claimed that the Republican nominee sexually abused them. Trump also taking aim at Hillary Clinton for what he characterizes her plan to leverage the global elite and the media and line her pockets with those donors. Watch this.
The largest shareholder in the Times is Carlos Slim. Now, Carlos Slim, as you know, comes from Mexico. He's given many millions of dollars to the Clintons and their initiative. So Carlos Slim, largest owner of the paper from Mexico. Reporters at the New York Times, they're not journalists. They're corporate lobbyists for Carlos Slim and for Hillary Clinton.
Joining me now, liberal commentator Danielle, McLaughlin, Heat Street political editor Jillian, Melchior, and political analyst Gina Loudon. Gina, let me start with you because it's not just Carlos Slim, who is a Mexican of Lebanese descent, but also Haim Sabin, who is perhaps the largest donor to the Clinton campaign. George Soros, of course, we know. These are who some people will call globalists, folks out there who are looking for perhaps a one-world kind of a vision that many people think Barack Obama shares with them, and certainly maybe Hillary Clinton as well. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think this should surprise us at all. We know from the WikiLeaks that Hillary Clinton straight up told Goldman Sachs of Wall Street not to bother to listen to what she actually says to the American people, but rather just listen to what she says to them, because that's the truth. There's a different story from Hillary for the voters and a different story for Wall Street. We know that in the WikiLeaks it was disclosed that she's 100% for TPP and that she will stand by that no matter what she tells the voters. So there's a very dichotomous person running for president here, and none of this should surprise us. All the WikiLeaks confirm all the collusion that we've always known existed. I guess we have to give up our tinfoil hats. Well,
yeah, Jillian, I mean, she is tight with these people, and the relationships are so tangled. And then you throw in Middle Eastern money. That one WikiLeaks that said that Saudi Arabia and Qatar both admitted from the Democratic camp that they were funding ISIS. And then, of course, in the last 2 weeks, Saudi Arabia gets this massive contract in defense planes from us. And then 2 days ago, Qatar, which gave $1 million to Bill Clinton's efforts, gets this massive contract. I mean, this is a tangled web.
Look, I think she opened herself up to this kind of criticism. And I actually did some original reporting on this. If you look at the Saban Foundation in particular, that's one of the ones that's been mentioned. This one's interesting because there are actually Judicial Watch emails where Bill Clinton was going to consult for him. State Department lawyers looked at it and said, this is a conflict of interest. This guy is involved in foreign policy. Now, it's pro-Israel foreign policy, probably would mesh with a lot of conservatives' viewpoints, so I'm not knocking anyone here. But they said it was a conflict of interest. Clinton Foundation turns around, takes millions of dollars from them. You have Bill and Hillary Clinton both speaking at the Saban Family Foundation. I think what you're seeing here is they knew it was a conflict of interest, and they chose to do it. They have left themselves wide open to this line of attack because it's indefensible, and both of these candidates are indefensible.
Danielle, and it's the thing, and it feels like it goes beyond money. And that's what even makes it a little bit more worrisome for Americans. Okay, if you want to line your pockets, even as a typical politician, that's one thing. But if you buy into some of the ideological rhetoric of these folks, then what you're essentially saying is that at one point you want to give up the sovereignty of America. Sort of not unlike what we saw in the UK saying, hey, we don't want Brussels calling the shots for us. I think Americans want to reject this kind of thing.
I agree that there is a different line of thought between conservatives and liberals on the extent to which we should have supranational bodies like the United Nations, for example, overseeing our laws. There is a debate. It's a healthy debate.
The liberals think the Constitution should supersede all of that stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. Liberals believe and understand that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And the way that it works is if we do sign on to a treaty, if we do sign on to the Paris Accord or any of these other things, it has to become enmeshed in federal law in order for it to rule American citizens. So I'm not going to stand here and say that the UN should be supranational to us, because that's not the way it works, even in liberal thought. And I really want to address this notion about Mr. Slim, his 17% stake in the New York Times. This is this otherism that we've seen from Donald Trump, and it's destructive. I mean, Rupert Murdoch owns Heat Street. Rupert Murdoch owns News Corp. The idea that somehow there's this global conspiracy, and I know it applies to liberal media, is utter nonsense, and it's very dangerous.
Also, like, isn't Carlos Slim, the Mexican, bringing jobs and money into the United States right now with this? So maybe that's not the thing to knock.
You can't have it both ways.
Gina, let me ask you your thoughts on that. I mean, is there a double standard here, or or do you see a greater threat? And it's not just Carlos Slim, but some of the other names that we've mentioned here, particularly George Soros, who seems to interfere with the sovereignty of nations, whether it's breaking the British pound or more recently funding Black Lives Matter in America.
Yeah, when these moguls decide that they get to control our media and our politics via a candidate that we have for president in the United States, that smacks, in my opinion, Charles, that smacks everything that is inherently American. And I think Americans have to fight back against this and absolutely reject this collusion that we've basically seen played out and proven at this point.
That's hilarious, though, because Donald Trump was a mogul until he decided to run for office, intervening in politics.
There's a big difference. I'm sorry.
His career as well.
No, there's a big difference. There's a big difference between a businessman doing business for his investors and a politician personally lining. Please let me finish. And a politician personally lining her pocket to the tunes of tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars with foreign governments, which, by the way, many are tied to ISIS and the terrorist movement, and they stone women and they throw gays off of buildings. This is not American.
No, and what I'm saying is there's absolutely a conflict of interest, but I think it's conspiracy theory and a little bit crazy and just not helpful to be suggesting that there's some sort of one world conspiracy going on.
I agree.
I mean, if we want to talk about intervention from foreign governments in this election, why not talk about Russia? Why not talk about how they're influencing this election by hacking? I mean, there are two sides to this story.
Leaking true matters is very different than influencing press. Leaking true matters, and I'm not excusing it. I don't think they should be hacking anything. But the information is there that's very different than trying to influence what is supposed to be the free press. This is very Pravda-esque. This is un-American, and there's a very big difference here between a private businessman. There's a difference between a private businessman and a politician personally profiting. I can't understand why you can't just understand that distinction.